This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because, well, it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. Are you a hockey fan? Then you'll love Eric Zweig's new book, Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. It's a treasure trove of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave even the most devoted puckhead astounded. The intense rivalries, epic showdowns, and historic clashes that shaped the NHL's early years, it's all in there. Zweig uncovers the true stories that helped shape the sport, ensuring that you will never look at hockey the same way again. Check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. And welcome to another edition of This Day in Sports History, a proud member of the Sports History Network. You can find more information and more podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's August 2nd, and on this day in 1979, New York Yankee catcher Thurman Munson was killed in a plane crash. It was an off day for the Yankees, and Munson, an experienced pilot, was practicing takeoffs and landings in his new Cessna Citation that he'd purchased 3 weeks earlier. Flying his own plane gave Munson the freedom to see his family who lived in Canton, Ohio. Munson was flying with two friends and approaching the runway of the Akron-Canton Airport around 4 in the afternoon. The plane clipped the tops of some trees, and it crashed a few hundred feet from the runway. The plane came to an abrupt stop, hitting a tree stump on the ground, and it burst into flames. His two friends, David Hall, a flight instructor, and Jerry Anderson, were able to escape, but their efforts to save Munson were futile due to the intense heat. Munson was the leader of the Yankees. He had been the captain since 1976, a career .292 hitter, and a guy who hit better than .300 5 times in his 10-year career. He won American League Rookie of the Year honors in 1970, and he was a league MVP in '76. His teammates were gutted when they got the news. Shortstop Bucky Dent was coming out of the Twin Towers after having dinner there when he heard it from the doorman. And he talked about how he was nearly inconsolable after hearing the news. Others, such as Lou Piniella, recalled trying to talk Thurman out of owning a plane like the Citation, which was a jet and not a prop plane that he had been trained on. Piniella recalled telling him that he should sell the jet 5 days earlier. The day of his funeral, Yankee players attended the service in Canton and had to play a game against Baltimore in Yankee Stadium that night. There weren't many dry eyes in Yankee Stadium, including Reggie Jackson, a man who had several altercations with Munson in the short time that he'd been a Yankee, and he was visibly weeping in right field. When Munson died on this day in 1979, he was 32 years old. Have you ever heard of baseball's Continental League? Well, there's really no reason why you should have, because they never actually played a game. But it still had an amazing influence on Major League Baseball. On this day in 1960, the Continental League effectively disbanded. But to understand why and what influence this league had on baseball, you have to go back a couple of years to 1957, when both the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Baseball Giants moved to California, leaving New York with only one team, and that team being in the American League. The idea for a new league came from a lawyer named William Shea, who wanted a National League team in New York, but he also saw and heard of other cities, both in the U.S. and Canada, that wanted a piece of the baseball pie. At this point, neither the American nor the National League was really interested in adding new franchises. But Congress was, and they started investigations looking into antitrust violations in Major League Baseball. Now, neither league was openly hostile to the upstarts, but they soon realized that action needed to be taken. Shea decided to form a new league. In 1959, an 8-team league was formed. Former Dodgers president Branch Rickey was elected as its first commissioner, and April 18, 1961 was the day games were scheduled to begin. The 8 cities involved were Denver, Houston, Minneapolis-St. Paul, New York City, Toronto, with Jack Kent Cooke putting up the money for that franchise, Atlanta, Dallas, and Buffalo. By July 1960, both the American and National Leagues had changed their mind a bit, and they were both ready to expand. When Shea was awarded a National League team to be located in New York, he dropped out of the Continental League group, and that team became the Mets, and they play in Shea Stadium, named after William. The National League also announced a team in Houston that became the Colt 45s and then later the Astros. Both the Mets and Astros were slated to begin in 1962. The American League allowed the Washington Senators to move to Minneapolis and placed a team back in D.C. to replace it, and added a team in California that became the Angels, with play beginning in 1961. Those moves into cities involved in the Continental League, or near to it, effectively killed the Continental League. One concession made to the remaining cities is that efforts would be made to expand or relocate teams to those cities that did not get a team. To this day, the only city still left out in the cold is Buffalo. So the argument could be made that baseball would have expanded eventually, but the Continental League was the catalyst to get that moving much quicker. In 1928, it was the women's 800-meter final, and it was also the final 800-meter to be run by women for 32 years. So if you listened really closely to the July 31st edition of this dish, then you may remember that the 1928 Olympics was the first summer games that allowed women to compete in track events. They had competed in swimming events since the 1912 games, and they were part of the Winter Olympics from the beginning as ice skaters. But running was said to be too stressful for a woman's constitution. The biggest event in question was the 800-meter run. How could a woman possibly run around a quarter-mile track twice without collapsing, or getting the vapors, or simply straining their fragile compositions? Men were downright apoplectic. The Pope Pius XI, was a staunch opponent of women overdoing it in physical competition. But the women were fine. After 3 heats the day before narrowed the field to 9 competitors, the final was set for this day. Germany's Nina Radke won with a time of 2 minutes 16.8 seconds. The best American finish was Florence McDonald in 6th place. 8 of the 9 women who competed finished the race within 12 seconds of the winner. And yet, numerous press reports from the event talked of women collapsing, unable to finish the event, or they were overly exhausted after crossing the finish line. It was like these men with their pencils and pads had never witnessed a running race before, when athletes who exert themselves actually get tired. Unfortunately, what the reports did was cause the Olympic Committee to end the 800-meter competition, fearing that women would hurt themselves if allowed to keep going. For another 32 years, the longest distance women were allowed to run was 200 meters. It wasn't until the 1960 Rome Olympics that the 800-meter was reinstated, and it wasn't until 1972 that women would be allowed to run a longer distance of 1,500 meters. On this day in 2012, it was Gabby Douglas, also known as the Flying Squirrel, winning the women's all-around gold medal at the Olympics. It was a bit of a surprise that Gabby Douglas was even a member of the 2012 Olympic team. Coming into the American Cup 4 months before the Olympics, she was competing as an alternate with Allie Raceman and Jordan Weber, already penciled in as the top 2 gymnasts. But Douglas's star shone the brightest and posted a score that would have won the meet over Weber, but again, she was competing as an alternate. Then, at the Olympic trials, she secured her spot by beating Weber, who at that time was the reigning world all-around champ. Once at the 2012 Olympics, held in London, Douglas did just enough to qualify for the finals. In gymnastics, it's not just the top scorers who advance. Only 2 from each country can move on to the finals. Raceman was first after the qualifiers, Douglas was third, and teammate Weber was a close fourth. But since Raceman and Douglas were the top 2 Americans, Weber had to watch a long line of gymnasts that she had just outscored compete for a gold medal. Douglas had a little bobble to start the finals when she had a lateral hop on her vault, but after nailing her uneven bars routine, she took the lead. She rocked her balance beam routine and then stunned during the floor exercise. When the points were all tabulated, Gabby Douglas won gold by 259 thousandths of a point over Russian gymnast Victoria Komova. Raceman finished in a tie for third, but after the tiebreaker was left off the podium, and she was denied a bronze medal. Douglas became just the 4th U.S. woman to win the all-around competition, joining Mary Lou Retton, Carly Patterson, and Nastia Liukin. She was also the first African-American gymnast to win the women's all-around competition. And on this day in 1997, the Birmingham Barons made news for something other than once being the place Michael Jordan played baseball. Minor League Baseball is a haven for sports marketing gimmicks. Well, on this day in 1997, the Barons became the first team to do a bobblehead giveaway. Now, bobbleheads had been around since the 1920s, but really didn't start to draw much attention until the 1960s. And bobbleheads had been sold at ballparks, but a bobblehead giveaway to draw people to the ballpark or as a thank you to season ticket holders had not been done before. A bit unlike what you might see today with a bobblehead giveaway, this wasn't a particular player being honored. Instead, it was a generic head in a Barons uniform. They did it again in 1998 and predated the first Major League Baseball bobblehead giveaway by a year and a half when the San Francisco Giants gave away Willie Mays bobbleheads May 9th, 1999. And it's time for today's Non-Sports Did You Know? It's probably hot where you are today. Well, if you happen to be using air conditioning to cool off, you can thank Willis Carrier, who invented air conditioning to lower humidity in a printing plant. That's all for today. And hey, I've been using a new podcast app to listen to my daily podcasts. It's called Good Pods. It's pretty cool, and one unique thing about it is it allows you to rate each episode. So if you really enjoy one, like, say, today's, you can give it 5 stars. Check it out. Find the Good Pods app in the App Store or Google Play Store. And like I said, that's all I've got for you today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, with more This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.